always been so, well, I don't, but it's almost like just like how.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I invite you behind the velvet curtains of country music's golden age, into a night that few dared to speak about, and even fewer truly understood. It wasn't a public brawl, no screaming, no microphones slammed, no guitars thrown, but it was something colder, something heavier. It was a silence that could cut through the noise of the Grand Ole Opry. A backstage room in 1993. Three legendary voices, Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt, and Emmylou Harris, reunited for what was meant to be a dazzling surprise performance. Fans had no idea what was about to happen, neither did the crew. But minutes before stepping on stage, two of those legends stood just feet apart, refusing to look at each other. One wanted to change the song, the other said no. And in that instant, years of friendship, artistic pride, and unspoken frustrations came crashing into the tight space behind the spotlight. What really happened that night? Why did Dolly and Linda, two women who had once called each other sisters, walk off stage colder than they came? And why did they both refuse to ever speak about it publicly? Tonight, we open that locked door, and we, finally, tell the story. Ladies and gentlemen, to understand the weight of that backstage silence, you must first understand who these women were, and still are, in the grand tapestry of American music. Let us begin with Linda Ronstadt. Born in Tucson, Arizona in 1946, she possessed a voice that was somehow both fierce and fragile, a voice that defied boundaries. While the world knew her as the Queen of Rock, those who truly listened understood she was something far deeper. Linda didn't chase stardom, she interpreted it. She wrapped her soul around Mexican canciones, Broadway standards, heartbreaking ballads, and yes, the heartland twang of country music. Her 1974 album, Heart Like a Wheel, was more than a success. It was a revolution. She didn't just top charts, she shattered genres. With over 100 million records sold, a dozen Grammy Awards, and inductions into multiple halls of fame, Linda Ronstadt was adored by critics and beloved by fans. But offstage, she was notoriously private. She never married, she rarely explained herself, and she did not suffer egos. Then came Dolly. Dolly Parton was born in a one-room cabin in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, the fourth of 12 children. From the humblest of beginnings, she rose not just to fame, but to cultural immortality. Known first for her honey-coated voice and blonde curls, Dolly was and remains one of the sharpest minds in music. Songwriter, businesswoman, actress, icon. But most importantly, a master communicator. She could make an arena of strangers feel like family, and do it in rhinestones. Her breakthrough hit Jolene was haunting in its simplicity. I Will Always Love You, written by Dolly in a single day, would go on to become one of the most enduring love songs of all time. And with her Dollywood empire and fierce philanthropy, she became a living symbol of generosity and wit. But behind the wigs and the jokes, Dolly was also a perfectionist. She ran her career with precision and clarity, and expected the same from those around her. Now, imagine the sheer gravity when Linda Ronstadt and Dolly Parton collided. They met in the 1970s, both already legends in their own right. But it wasn't until 1987 that they would create something unforgettable together, Trio, an album recorded with their mutual friend and fellow icon, Emmylou Harris.
It was a labor of love that had taken years to come together. And when it finally arrived, Trio was a triumph. The harmonies were ethereal, the chemistry electric. The public adored it, critics raved. The record earned multiple Grammy nominations and sold over 1 million copies. More than that, it felt pure. It felt unbreakable. In interviews, the three women spoke of deep respect, of late-night chats, of laughter and long drives and studio perfectionism. They weren't just colleagues, they were soul sisters, as Emmylou once put it. But as with all great partnerships, there were undercurrents. Linda was a stickler for musical structure. Dolly thrived on spontaneity. Emmylou, the peacemaker, often bridged the divide. And yet, in public, the trio remained unshakable. Until that night in 1993, when something snapped. A night when rehearsals met resistance, when a proposed change turned into a personal offense, and when two giants of country music chose silence over song. What caused the fracture, and why did it cut so deep? Ladies and gentlemen, we are only just beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, it was meant to be a moment of magic, a reunion whispered about in industry circles but never confirmed. Grand Ole Opry, 1993, a tribute evening filled with stars and legends. But somewhere in the back hallways, behind the clatter of instruments and echoes of tuning vocals, a storm was brewing, silent, sudden, and unforgettable. The idea was simple: surprise the audience with an unannounced performance by Trio. It had been 6 years since the release of their first album, and while rumors swirled of a second collaboration, no public appearance had united Linda, Dolly, and Emmylou since then. So when all three were spotted on the rehearsal list, anticipation surged. Linda and Emmylou arrived early. As always, Linda came prepared. Her pages marked, her vocals rehearsed to precision. She was never careless with performance. Every harmony, every breath was intentional. Emmylou, ever the gentle presence, floated between musicians, calm and focused. But Dolly was late. Not carelessly late, but understandably so. She had just wrapped filming an appearance for a TV special in Los Angeles the night before. She boarded a red-eye, arrived with 2 hours to spare, and was rushed through hair, makeup, and a brief vocal warm-up. The tension began when Dolly asked for a change, a subtle one, she believed, but to Linda it was seismic. Dolly wanted to swap their chosen song, Wildflowers, for a more upbeat track, Those Memories of You. She claimed her voice felt better suited to it that evening. Linda, however, had rehearsed Wildflowers meticulously. It was delicate, harmonically complex, and had always been her favorite from the album. Linda didn't yell, that wasn't her way, but what she gave was even sharper. Stillness, a cutting pause, a firm glance, and a simple phrase. "We've rehearsed for a reason." Dolly, caught off guard, tried to smile it off. She cracked a joke, then another. But the laughter didn't land. The air was heavy. Linda wasn't budging. And for the first time, Dolly felt something she rarely encountered: rejection from a stage equal. It wasn't about the song. It never really is. It was about control, about trust, about two women who had spent their entire careers carving out spaces in a male-dominated industry, now clashing over whose instincts would prevail. Witnesses said Emmylou tried to defuse the moment gently. She offered to mediate, to sing lead on the substitute song. But by then it was too late. Linda had withdrawn. Dolly, always the showwoman, forced a smile, nodded politely, and fell quiet. The performance went on. They walked on stage together. They sang. Their harmonies were, by all technical accounts, perfect. But those who knew them, who watched closely, saw it. Linda's gaze fixed forward, Dolly's smile a little too wide. The final chorus, once sung with 3 voices entwined, landed hollow and hurried. No post-performance embrace, no backstage laughter. Just silence. And after that night, Trio, as a unit, never performed together live again. Was it pride? Was it exhaustion? Or was it the sudden realization that perhaps even among legends, some harmonies can't be forced? Whatever the answer, that night marked the end of something that had once felt timeless, and neither woman would ever speak about it publicly. Ladies and gentlemen, what followed that quiet storm in 1993 wasn't an explosion, it was erosion. Not of careers, not of respect, but of something more fragile. The space between 2 souls who had once sung as one. In the months after the Opry performance, whispers began to swirl through Nashville's close-knit circles. People asked why the trio never appeared together again, why they stopped giving joint interviews, why the long-rumored Trio 2 album, which had been mostly recorded years earlier, remained mysteriously unreleased. Journalists reached out. Publicists deflected. When pressed, Dolly offered her trademark charm. "We've all got our own roads, honey. Sometimes they run together, sometimes they split off." But the sparkle in her eye, usually so effortless, seemed dimmer when she spoke of Linda. Linda Ronstadt, for her part, said almost nothing. In interviews, when asked about the trio, she praised Emmylou without hesitation, but when it came to Dolly, she carefully pivoted, mentioning scheduling conflicts, different creative paths, never once revealing the wound that so many suspected was still open. Industry insiders knew better. One producer, who had worked closely with Linda during that period, confided anonymously. Linda felt hurt. She felt like Dolly wasn't taking the music seriously. And if you know Linda, you know that's the deepest cut. Another close friend to Dolly recalled a different perspective. Dolly doesn't do tension. She wants to fix everything with a joke or a song. But Linda's not built like that. She's about truth. And if she feels dismissed, she walks away. Meanwhile, Emmylou remained heartbreakingly silent. Known for her grace and spiritual calm, she later hinted in a PBS interview, "Sometimes the best music comes from the hardest moments, but not all moments need to be sung about." The years ticked on. Trio 2 was finally released in 1999, 6 years after that night. But even its arrival was quiet, almost hesitant. No tour, no joint appearances. The album was critically acclaimed, but emotionally distant, as if haunted by what could have been. And then, in 2013, everything changed. Linda Ronstadt announced that she had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. The illness had quietly robbed her of her singing voice, a voice that had once filled concert halls, broken hearts, and changed lives. Suddenly, the silence between her and Dolly took on a deeper ache. When asked about Linda's condition, Dolly paused, her voice soft and uncharacteristically unguarded. That voice was one of the greatest I've ever heard. I don't care if we ever sang again. I just wanted her to be okay. It was the first time Dolly publicly acknowledged the gap, not just the physical one, but the emotional canyon that had stood between them for 20 years. There was no dramatic reunion, no on-stage reconciliation. But behind the scenes, something shifted. A card, a phone call, a quiet visit. Details remain private, as they should. But those close to both women said something beautiful. They didn't need to talk about what happened. They just needed to be kind. Sometimes, dear viewers, the most painful truths are the ones never spoken, and the deepest forgiveness is the one we never hear. And still, the question lingers. Was it just one night that changed everything? Or had that night simply revealed what had been quietly unraveling all along?
Ladies and gentlemen, in a world where every emotion seems to be broadcast, tweeted, or packaged for a headline, some of the most powerful reconciliations happen far from the spotlight. In 2007, Linda Ronstadt was among the honorees at the prestigious Kennedy Center Honors, a celebration reserved for the legends of American art and culture. The audience included presidents, world leaders, and the most influential voices in entertainment. But Linda, always reserved, sat quietly in her seat, her once bright eyes now softened by age, and perhaps something else, a lingering grief that not even accolades could touch. And then, as the tribute to her life in music began, a familiar figure stepped onto the stage. It was Dolly. Dressed in black and silver, elegant yet unmistakably herself, Dolly Parton took the microphone. She didn't perform, she didn't joke. She simply spoke. "I'm here tonight to honor one of the most extraordinary women I've ever known, a voice that could calm a storm and stir a soul." The crowd erupted in applause, but Linda, she didn't smile at first. She looked stunned. And then Dolly said this, "I never stopped singing with you, even in silence." At that moment, cameras captured Linda's hand rising slowly to her heart. No words, just a soft, private gesture between two women who had once harmonized like heaven and later fallen silent like strangers. Later that night, away from the cameras, witnesses saw them embrace in a quiet hallway. No entourage, no fanfare, just Linda holding Dolly's hand. No one knows what they said. Maybe nothing needed to be said. Emmylou Harris, ever the quiet soul at the center of this story, would later reflect in an interview. They didn't need an apology. They needed time, and they got it. That backstage rift in 1993, the moment that ended a musical era, may have never fully healed. But perhaps it didn't have to. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a duet or a statement or a stage reunion. Sometimes healing is one woman showing up when the other never expected it. And sometimes that is enough. Ladies and gentlemen, when we think of legends, we imagine perfection. We see polished interviews, choreographed performances, and harmony, both literal and metaphorical. But the truth, as always, is more human than divine. Dolly Parton and Linda Ronstadt were never just singers. They were forces of nature, born from different corners of America, shaped by different fires, but drawn to the same sacred thing, the power of song. What happened backstage in 1993 wasn't just a disagreement over a set list. It was two women, each carrying the weight of expectation, legacy, and their own bruised vulnerabilities, colliding at the wrong time. And yet what followed may be even more powerful than what was lost. Because in the silence that stretched across years, in the lack of interviews, explanations, or public apologies, there was still something deeply dignified. Neither woman chose to rewrite the narrative.
Neither tried to win. They let time do its work. And in the end, perhaps that was the purest form of love they could offer each other. Dear viewers, I ask you, is forgiveness always about saying the right words? Can the quiet act of simply showing up carry more truth than 1,000 confessions? And when we look at our own lives, the relationships frayed by pride, by missteps, by moments of silence, do we wait for a perfect reconciliation, or do we learn to embrace what's left? As you sit with those questions, remember, behind every song that moved you, every harmony that gave you chills, were people, flawed, brilliant, hurting, loving. And sometimes, the most heartbreaking ballads are the ones never recorded. Good night, dear friends, and thank you for listening.